Today at the National Press Club, Rod Sims, the chair of the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. Taking on the role in 2011, he's become the longest-serving chair of the consumer watchdog and will discuss some of the challenges that need to be addressed across different sectors. Rod Sims with today's Press Club address.
Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club in Canberra for today's Westpac address. I'm the club's president, Laura Tingle. Today's speaker is finishing a record-breaking and distinguished career as head of the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. The past decade has seen all sorts of really new challenges in competition policy as a result of the digital age. New platforms, new competition issues, all new areas of competition law around the globe. And Australia has really made a mark in a lot of those. But it's also issues that are very familiar to most Australians about competition in areas like banking and finance and in areas like the energy market, which have been crucial to what Rod Sims has been looking after in that period. And we're looking forward to him addressing us today on what has happened in the past and where he thinks the ACCC and competition policy will go next. So please join me in welcoming Rod Sims.
Thanks very much, Laura. And look, thank you to the Press Club for the honour of speaking to you today. Over nearly 11 years at the ACCC, I really have enjoyed and benefited from the interaction with the media. I often have these discussions with media on a topic and come away with new perspectives I didn't think of before, so I thank you for that. I came to the ACCC believing that the media seeks to work in the interests of Australia, and in my time at the ACCC, my view on that has only increased. So I have great admiration for the media. For me, it's been a fascinating and I hope productive time at the ACCC. While I will indulge in outlining some of the things I look back on with pride, I will spend most of my time today on some issues and challenges ahead, which I'm sure is really what's going to most interest you. When I arrived at the ACCC, I mentioned my main objective in chairing the ACCC was, and I quote, that Australians see that a market economy and strong competition works for them and that they see the ACCC working tirelessly for the long-run interests of consumers. We must recognise that a market-based economy is actually fragile because its organising principle relies on companies and business people pursuing their own self-interest. Now, this is not an obvious way to organise society. For this to work for the benefit of all Australians requires, at a minimum, strong competition between firms and strong enforcement of the Competition and Consumer Act. In our society, large established businesses have a very strong voice, which is not surprising. They employ a lot of people, supply a lot of our needs. Often, however, the understandable interest of large established businesses in short-term advantage sees them, I believe, work to the disadvantage of their own interests. Large established businesses have opposed all the main changes to the Competition and Consumer Act when they were introduced. They opposed, for example, laws against misleading and deceptive conduct. How could you possibly know what that is? How could you possibly enforce it? I would ask, however, that if we didn't have a general law like that, you would have, in the meantime, to have replaced it with a whole range of specific laws to stop a whole lot of wrongs, which would cause a lot of damage to the economy and to business who opposed the law in the first place. So the Competition and Consumer Act largely has economy-wide laws whose effectiveness underpins the necessary wide acceptance of a market economy. Perceptions of unfairness and inequality will see faith in a market economy eroded. The vast bulk of the population always wants regulators to do more, including the ACCC, while large established businesses and sometimes governments want us to do less. An occasional criticism of the ACCC, which I don't hear that often these days, but can be that it is toothless. This charge is levelled at all regulators at some point in time, but it's levelled against the ACCC under the mistaken belief that price gouging or charging excessive pricing is illegal when, except for exceptional circumstances, it is not. So most times regulators get accused, or certainly the ACCC get accused for not enforcing laws that don't actually exist, and sometimes by politicians, which is interesting. I'll mention later the need for changes to our merger and consumer laws. Large established businesses and their advisors will oppose the changes I'm mentioning today. But my guess is that well over 90% of Australians will support them. Further, I think such changes will strengthen our market economy and benefit the vast majority of Australian businesses. So, look, I'll briefly reflect on some of the past, but spend most of the time on looking forward. So in my first speech as chair of the ACCC in August 2011, I said that close to 100% success rate in court, which the ACCC then had, indicated that we needed to take on more cases where the outcome was less certain, where we were less certain we would win, and we've done that. I said I wanted to make full use of the new consumer laws, and we've certainly done that. And I also said we needed to advocate and contribute more broadly to debates where we have a useful voice to add, and we've done that. I think the ACCC is now a more sophisticated agency. We've improved our enforcement model. We're a recognised world leader in consumer enforcement, in product safety and in digital platform issues, and we're often seen as the competition champion in Australia. So a lot of change there. Just let me briefly mention a few things that I'm particularly proud of. First, consumer enforcement. We've had very creative wins against companies like Trivago, where we managed to unpick their algorithm. I didn't have that cleverness, you understand, but staff did. We had a win against Google in a very complicated case. We've seen penalties imposed by the courts increase from, in 2011, 12, 13, $1 million was seen as a good high penalty. In the most recent year, we got $50 million against Telstra, $125 million against Volkswagen, and $150 million against a vocational education company, APIE. I should add that our ScamWatch site is recently recognised with Scam Fighter of the Year award for 2022 by the Global Anti-Scam Alliance, no doubt due to Delia a fair bit sitting in the audience there. Second, we've got 11 competition cases currently in court, and some very important competition cases will unfold very soon, likely as soon as I walk out the door. We've got a very good win-loss rate record, including recent guilty pleas in cartel cases, including by individuals in 2 criminal cases. I recognise, however, we have some losses, and I recognise in a very high-profile case that's been well covered in the media. And we, of course, reflect on those losses, but you've got to expect losses when you're a strong enforcer of the law, and that's what we like to be. We did successfully campaign for a significant change to Section 46, you remember the effects case, the effects change, against a strong lobbying effort by large established businesses. And we won our first Section 46 case as a result of that law change. But most significantly, as a result of that law change, companies can't do a whole lot of things because the previous law gave them a free pass to engage in various anti-competitive conduct that they can't do anymore. So the advice they're getting has changed, and the Australian economy is better for that. We have done world-leading work on digital platforms, particularly looking at things like apps and ad tech and search. We conceived of and worked closely on the News Media Bargaining Code, conceived of it and worked closely with the government and Treasury, and that has seen over 200 million Australian dollars a year go into media in this country, which I think has made a real difference. And I should add, both large, medium and small media companies have all benefited. Fourth, I think we've changed the debate a little bit further to go on privatising unregulated monopolies, which see huge amounts of money raised from privatisations, which end up costing consumers and users large sums of money. And so we've just tried to make that clearer and more recognised so that people stop and think a bit more before they do that. Fifth, we've successfully conducted numerous market studies which I think have improved the electricity, gas, financial sector and various agricultural markets. We also implemented and nurtured at the start the consumer data right and got that off to a successful start. We've done very good work on product safety. We had a 99.9% recall of Takata airbags and a world first safety standard for button batteries. And you really don't want to read the stories about what happens to a young child when they swallow one of those. Eighth, we introduced a monitoring program so that people know the download speeds they're getting on NBN. We've improved the information to consumers about speeds, and we've commenced a detailed process to reset the regulatory rules facing the NBN. Ninth, I'm particularly proud of our international cooperation. I think the cooperation we have with our overseas agencies has never been higher. A couple of days ago, we announced an agreement with our Five Eyes agency partners to look at collusion in the freight sector. But we've done a whole lot of work in the ASEAN region, helping smaller agencies, and those agencies are so grateful for the work we're doing. Really, our standing in the ASEAN region has never been higher, and that actually helps Australia. The ambassadors in each of these countries love it when we turn up. 10th, and lastly, we have 88% of ACCC employees seeing the ACCC as a good place to work compared to an APS-wide figure of 68%. So I've left a lot out, which you'll be relieved at, and I'm now going to turn to the issues and challenges, which I know will be much more interesting. I do think the issues and challenges I'm going to mention actually create quite a good economic reform agenda. And I think that agenda is needed. Obviously, the pandemic is dominating everything that goes on at the moment, in government particularly, but when that fades, hopefully this agenda is there to be picked up. So again, I'm going to confine myself to 10 areas. So number one, Australian consumer law. We have made great strides in consumer law, as I mentioned. We're probably the most aggressive consumer law enforcer in the world, and we have the highest penalties levied for breaches of consumer law in the world. But it may surprise you to know the following. It's not unlawful in Australia to sell unsafe goods. It's not unlawful to not honour consumer guarantees, provided you don't tell the affected consumer that you're not going to honour, that they've got no such right. If they're told that, then we can get them under misleading, deceptive conduct. But if they shut up about it, they don't have to honour the consumer guarantees. Pretty obvious area to fix. Standard form contracts, large companies dealing with consumers or small business, they put the most outrageous terms in there, such as mid-contract we can do what we like to the price, and that's not illegal, and it should be. And also large companies can abuse their position of strength by treating their consumers unfairly. For example, we had a health insurer raise the effective prices patients pay for repeat hospital services without telling them, and so they only found out they had a very large bill to pay next time they went for their repeat service. So, and there's no law against that. I mean, we actually took the case and we lost. There's many things that the consumer law does not cover, and it should. Now, most of the things I've mentioned, well, all of them are at various stages of consideration, but they're taking too long, and some of them have got a long way to go. But we do need to fix those problems, a general safety provision. We need an unfair practices provision. We need to make consumer guarantees obligatory so that you have to honour them. and we need to make unfair contract terms illegal as well. And if we did that, our economy would work better and people would feel a lot better about our economy, and that is important. Competition law enforcement. This is an interesting one. There's a school of thought that commerce in a market economy is a no-holds-barred, robust business, and that competition law should rarely interfere in this. There's some merit in that, but we do not want competition laws to become a protection racket for those who already have substantial market power and seek to use it or enhance it, and sometimes competition law appears just that. Business argues very strongly that we should always avoid false negatives, by which I mean taking action against a party or stopping a merger on the basis that you think it's anti-competitive and it subsequently turns out it wasn't. I have the opposite view. I think it is very hard to chill, which is the technical term in competition land, business enthusiasm and innovation. If you don't believe that, you've never worked in the private sector. But what we've got to do is make sure we are not letting anti-competitive behaviour go through. We've got to guard against the false positives, because once you let market power get gathered, it really damages the economy and it's very hard to fix after the event. Now, competition cases in Australia are very hard to win, as shown in a recent case involving alleged barriers to the Port of Newcastle competing with Port Botany, and that's currently before the full federal court on appeal. And at some stage, our competition laws may need re-examination to ensure they're effective at promoting competition. And we've got some current cases and impending future cases which will give us a valuable insight into the need for this. Now, my views on merger law reform are well known. Australia is almost unique in not having a formal merger approval system. So when you see the ACCC's approved it, no, we haven't. We've just said we will not oppose it. We have no formal approval system for mergers in Australia. If it gets to court, we have to prove that future negative consequences will occur, which can only be speculated on because the merger hasn't happened yet. And you've got to speculate on them in a courtroom against the so-called real-world evidence of the necessarily self-interested merger parties about what will happen in the future. So you have these wonderful people turning up in suits swearing that this is what's going to happen. They're very credible, they know their industry very well, and they say to the court that what the ACCC is speculating on is theoretical, such that if you're going to gain market power, you won't use it. In addition to a formal merger regime, we're also proposing that firms which already have substantial market power should not be able to acquire if that would significantly increase their market power or extend or entrench it. In my view, and the view of many others, the Australian economy suffers from high levels of market concentration to the detriment of consumers, small business and productivity in Australia. The most important tool to prevent this is our merger laws, and they are not up to the task. Australia is currently facing supply and logistics challenges. I think these are made worse by the industry concentration that we have and by our infrastructure bottlenecks. We need to address this through competition law to prevent anti-competitive abuses of market power and through general infrastructure reform. Now, with competition law, the ACCC will continue to take cases, but we need to see how those cases go to see whether we need further reform. But we certainly need further reform of infrastructure. Australia has high-cost infrastructure. While, as I've said today, the debate has turned a bit, we keep privatising assets and claiming success when we flog them off for an extremely high price. These high prices are very often, virtually always, the result of restricting competition to the entity that you're selling, or selling a monopoly, which people have no choice but to use, with no regulation at all on the price. So people who pay the most are the ones who will take most advantage of that situation, and that is just absolutely must be true. So we seem to focus on how much we can sell infrastructure assets for in Australia rather than having our infrastructure benefit our wider economy. And as I say, this can affect existing users and I think can and does represent a continuing tax on our community. Perhaps the most recent example is state governments creating a monopoly in electronic property conveyancing that is now called PEXA and then selling it. The way PEXA now operates as a monopoly makes it very hard for the would-be competitors who are trying to get into the market. I think it'd be a good idea if all governments signed up to a checklist saying prior to privatisation, you tick a box that says you're not restricting competition and you tick another box saying you've got appropriate regulation in place before you privatise it. That would make a massive amount of difference. Another important challenge we have is redoing the regulatory arrangements for the NBN. We've spent $50 billion on the NBN and the objective must not be to get a commercial return on the $50 billion. It must instead be to make the best use of the NBN. The prices that allow the NBN to get a commercial return are very unlikely to be the same prices that make the best use of the NBN. We all saw the benefit of the NBN getting completed just in time for the pandemic lockdowns. That's just a taste of the benefits if we get the pricing right. Prices obviously have to allow NBN to keep investing, but they also must be priced to make the best use of the assets. Just turning to energy, our electricity and gas markets are in a mess for a very, very wide range of reasons. I devoted an entire press club speech to this some years back, and I won't go over it again. But I'll make a simple point. Most of the world has accepted that there is a negative externality associated with carbon. Australia's decided not to deal with this issue via a market-based mechanism, and let's be clear, that's a very broadly based view that we didn't want a market-based mechanism. So we're left with a challenge of how we achieve affordability, sustainability and reliability without seriously trading off one of those objectives against the other. And I think almost all the voices in the debate focus on one, maybe two objectives, but not three. And we're not going to solve this unless we focus on all three. You won't achieve one of those three without the other two, and it's just not worth trying. But most of the voices are narrowly focused. Australia is really well placed to achieve a lot in this area, given our abundance of all sorts of energy resources and minerals. So we have to find a way of getting those three objectives in balance, otherwise we'll miss a great opportunity. Now, I'm proud of the work that the ACCC has done in terms of digital platforms. We are at the forefront of what's going on in the world and in some ways have led the world, and I'm very proud of that. We have an internet dominated by a few gatekeeper companies. Google has 95% of search, Facebook dominates social media, and Google and Apple dominate the app market, particularly on mobile devices. So when people say we need a free internet, well, you've got these gatekeepers controlling your access to the internet. They did innovate to their way to success. They do have fantastic products, but they also acquired a huge array of companies that have extended their reach and cemented their power. They also engage in many activities from product bundling to self-preferencing their own products and services that have lessened competition in various important digital markets over time. They also have access to and control a massive amount of our data, which has seen harms ranging from that seen with the dreadful outcome from the Cambridge Analytica scandal to profiling people to maximise sales by exploiting consumer vulnerabilities. Action is needed, and the ACCC will, early next week, release a discussion paper outlining a range of options for comment. Such options would impose upfront rules that would prevent the worst abuses of dominance and protect consumers. We have already led the world in the News Media Bargaining Code. It is unique. It is the best way to deal with these issues. And as I say, that's dealt with one issue very effectively, which is the lack of bargaining power of media companies with the platforms. But there are so many other issues, and action will occur internationally. There's a lot of action occurring, with or without us, but we are very well placed to be at the forefront of all the efforts in relation to digital platforms. We can shape those efforts to the benefit of Australia and Australian businesses. In relation to financial services, there's a huge range of challenges. I'll just mention three. The price of the most important product people have, which is your mortgage on your home, is unknowable without huge effort and cost, which banks benefit from and consumers are harmed by. The consumer data right will help a lot, but the ACCC has recommended that consumers be continually informed by a prompt of what typical buyers are paying so that they know when they need to seek a lower interest rate or change their bank. Second, to help address issues associated with debanking, we recommended a scheme to enable fintechs or money remitters to show banks they have adequate systems in place to manage risks associated with money laundering. If they can show that their systems are up to scratch and they still get debanked, then we at the ACCC can do something about it. But at the moment, it's too confused, so we need that checklist. And third, of course, is the role of the digital platforms in our largely cashless world. So is, for example, Apple engaging in anti-competitive conduct by insisting that all payments using its smartphones via Apple Pay and restricting access to near-field technology so that others cannot provide full services to their own digital wallets? Is that anti-competitive? We need to get to the bottom of it, but it's certainly problematic. In agriculture, look, it's interesting. I've been surprised at how little influence on policy that Australian farmers have. You might have a different view, but that's been my take. Large corporate farmers do okay, but processors and intermediaries appear to have much more sway over policy than the farmers do. Typical farmers have no say on the prices that the concentrated downstream buyers pay them, and then usually they face the risk of a downward adjustment in international prices, which they're worse placed to manage. So they carry the risks, they've got no control over managing it. And that risk is passed on by the intermediary. Now, I'm proud to say the ACCC has had some success. We've had the Dairy Code, which has helped farmers. We've seen help shorten the outrageous payment times for grape producers. Some of our other recommendations haven't yet been fully implemented. We did a perishable goods inquiry and recommended, again, that we need an unfair practices provision. Because what often happens is farmers with perishable goods, they'll reach an agreement, sell it to an intermediary, the intermediary's got the good and says prior to paying them, I'm going to knock 20% off. Now you can't then at that stage divert the good because it's perishable and you won't be able to send it to anybody else. I think that's unfair. I think most people think that's unfair, but the only way to deal with it is an unfair practices provision. We've also got reform of the Murray-Darling Basin inquiry, which we recommended. It is vitally important for East Coast agriculture. I don't know whether many people realise just how, the Murray-Darling Basin trading system, water trading system is unique in the world. It's absolutely a world-class system, but it needs a lot of reform. We recommended a lot of reform, and I'm delighted the government's doing that. Now, small business is another group that's insufficiently heard. They suffer badly from unfair contract terms in standard form contracts and from a range of unfair practices that an unfair practices provision would help prevent. They can face contracts for essential inputs with prices that can go up at any time mid-contract, and there's a range of other behaviour. They can also face arbitrary algorithm changes that can destroy their business, and they can face platforms with no products to sell, entering their market to attract their customers, whom they then charge large commissions to purely for being an intermediary that didn't actually do anything, such like a florist and telling people you live in a particular geographic area and you're nowhere near it. I could go on, but I think some small businesses want protection from competition. I get that. But often they're simply after a level playing field, and not addressing that need for a level playing field increases some of their other complaints, which is not helpful. I think if we made the changes to the consumer laws, it would be beneficial for a small business and for Australia. Just look, with the consumer data right, it was recommended by the Productivity Commission. We got right behind it. We were charged with implementing it, bringing it into being, and I'm proud of the way we've done that. And I would urge you all not to underestimate the benefits that the CDR will bring. It's a bit like the NBN. It takes a long time to get built, but when it gets into takeoff, it takes off pretty quickly, and that's what you're going to see with the CDR. I think the issue, though, with CDR is the key point I want to make about the consumer data right here is it's got inbuilt privacy protections. It needed those privacy protections because our Privacy Act is way out of date and not up to the task. But the CDR shows that we can make good use of data and protect privacy at the same time. So we need to change the Privacy Act in quite a fair bit of detail so that we can make the best use of data. If we don't have a Privacy Act that's fit for purpose, we won't make the best use of data because you continually bang against people wanting to use data and their privacy getting damaged. And look, I'll just finish quickly with aviation. Obviously, aviation's had a shocking time, and Australia desperately needs a competitive aviation sector, given our land mass and the fact that we're basically a whole lot of city-states. Despite this reality, however, the government, many years ago, I hasten to add, removed regulation from airports just as they privatised them, so again they could boost the proceeds from sale, and there continues to be no price regulation of landing or other charges levied by the monopoly airports. We've got the prospect of more competition from Rex on city routes and Bonza, who'll target underserved routes. Whatever the chances those companies have of success, they must not fail simply because they can't get slots at our airports. The main airlines don't need as many slots as they have. We've got to make sure that the slot management system doesn't protect the incumbent. And of course the ACCC is going to be watching very carefully to make sure Virgin and Qantas aren't flying new routes that they previously didn't at a loss to try and block the new entrants. So I said earlier, governments, and I've said it many times, our governments must have their main focus on the pandemic. Only once that settles can we get back to normal. But when COVID is under control, I think that important and early movement on the issues I've mentioned today will do much to help our prosperity and much to improve faith in our market economy. Progress is underway on some of the issues I mentioned, but there's a lot more to do. I should add, I can assure you I'm not retiring. I'm going to be finding some positions that will allow me to continue to advocate on many issues, both in Australia and internationally. So you haven't seen the last of me, I'm afraid. Thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Sims. If I could start with the famous Dublin question about, you probably wouldn't start from here to get to Dublin, but just taking up your point on privatisations and market structures, there's been a lot of discussion about the way telecommunications was carved up when it was initially sort of deregulated and privatised, obviously also about energy markets. If you were able to wave the magic wand and say, well, there's one sector which really was a disaster in terms of the way it was carved up, and it probably needs to be at some point completely reconfigured. Is there one? And is there on the other side of things, is there an example of a privatisation that hasn't created monopoly or entrenched a monopoly circumstance faced by consumers, or that has been done well by a government at any level?
A lot in that question, thanks, Laura. But look, I think we had a very unfortunate example in 1990 with Telstra. The right thing to do would have been, at that time, to have split the retail from the network. You wouldn't have needed to invent the NBN, it would have just come about naturally. They would have had an incentive to build that. But we've had NBN that had to build a network from scratch. You know, go and build a $50 billion network. On day one, you've got one person, the CEO has been appointed, go hire a few people and do it. I mean, no wonder it took a bit of time to take off. So that was done badly. But, you know, $50 billion later, we're probably in an okay spot. That's my point. Whether it should have been 50 billion, 30 billion, 70 billion, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But let's just price the thing for best use rather than to get a return on capital. Look, so Victoria privatised its electricity assets well. I remember we had to fight off the person who was running all the electricity generators at that time, who thought really the most commercial thing to do was keep all the generators in one area, under one company. But no, Victoria split them up, did a very good job and got that pretty right. By the time New South Wales came along, they sold their 3 gentailers to the 3 incumbent private sector gentailers, and so the competitive gain we thought we'd get, we completely lost. So there have been successes such as Victoria privatising its electricity assets, but most often it gets overwhelmed by the need to sell them for the highest price.
Next question is from Julie Hare.
Julie Hare from the Australian Financial Review. I'm a director of the National Press Club. Thank you very much for your speech. There's been a lot of interest in the last few days about the Mike Cannon-Brookes Brookfield takeover of AGL. You've raised some issues this morning about ownership by Brookfield of transmission wires that goes into the poles and wires. I'm wondering what other issues the ACCC would look at and what it might take to get the deal over the line.
So the only issue, the deal's not done, so it hasn't come to us yet. We haven't engaged with the parties, so very, very, very early stage. But I think the only issue that I can think of so far with the bid is that Brookfield own a company called AusNet. AusNet has the transmission assets in Victoria, and in the energy market, it's long been considered, once they were broken up, that you couldn't have one company owning generation assets and transmission assets, because it's the transmission assets that take the product of the generators and the transmission line can congest other generators and benefit your generator. Now, that would be a big problem in New South Wales and Queensland. In Victoria, though, they have a system where the market operator runs a lot of the transmission. So we'll just have to look at that. It's a very complex issue and we haven't started to look at it, but that's the only issue, I think. And in terms of what it takes to get the deal over the line, I have no idea. I'm sure there's some business journalists here who can give you a good shot at that. But the only issue we're going to look at is ownership of generation and transmission in Victoria.
Thank you.
Greg Brown.
Greg Brown from The Australian. Given the geopolitical tensions with the Russia-Ukraine situation, what are the risks you see for Australian consumers? Can we expect petrol prices and gas prices to rise even higher? And what are the triggers, particularly with petrol, what are the triggers that the government has and policymakers in Australia have to keep prices as affordable as possible?
Yeah, look, good question. You've already had, oil prices are close to $100 a barrel. It's just patently ridiculous, well above any sense of cost of production. And of course made worse by the OPEC cartel, which operates with the Russians. So you've got real problems there, but it's a cartel no competition regulator can get at because it's run by governments. So the real heart of the petrol problem has always been that OPEC cartel. So the tensions around Ukraine have just built on supply-demand problems in the energy market worldwide, because we came out of COVID, demand returned for oil and gas and the supply just wasn't there. Ukraine just made that worse. So picking your two bits of two sectors, with gas, we're fortunate. I mean, in Europe and Asia, they're paying $35 a gigajoule. We're still paying around 10. And I think that's got a lot to do with the heads of agreement the government entered into with the gas producers. I think the gas producers know that if they started to put up the price domestically too much, the government, I mean, they're making a lot of money, these gas producers at the moment. I mean, a lot of money. And they don't want anything to interfere with their ability to export. So I think they'll tread very carefully, and I'd be very surprised if our gas prices go up much above $10 a gigajoule, no matter what happens internationally. I hope I'm right. I think I'm right. Petrol, not much we can do. I mean, it's interesting, our petrol prices are high, they're very high. We have the 4th lowest taxation of petrol in the world. It's still about 55 cents a litre. Every time you go to the pump, 55 cents is going to the government taxes, largely to pay for the roads. But that 55 cents a litre you're paying in tax is the 4th lowest in the world. So quite what you do to deal with that, I don't know. I certainly wouldn't be recommending the government step in and do anything about that.
Mike Foley.
Thanks, Mr Sims. Mike Foley from the Age and Sydney Morning Herald. Just following on from Greg's line of questioning, you mentioned that the market economy is fragile and it requires strong competition. And I'm thinking here of long-term gas contracts and certainty for local gas buyers that are so obviously crucial to the local manufacturing sector still. You've been running a long-run gas inquiry. Could you reflect on how the supply contracts have developed over time? And I'm wondering, you have raised questions about the behaviour of the LNG exporters when they offer domestic contracts as well in the most recent report. So my question is, outside of increasing gas supply to create more of a surplus of supply into the domestic market, what can governments do to alleviate some of the problems that you've raised? And also, there's been talk about Australia exporting more LNG in the near term to fill the gap that's been created in Europe with the Russia crisis. Could you give us an insight of what you think what effect that might have on the domestic market as well?
Yeah, I think we have to remember with the gas market that we had gas at $3 to $4 a gigajoule prior to the 3 LNG producers getting the go-ahead in Queensland. And it's really quite extraordinary. I mean, we've had big gas production on the west coast, but on the east coast we had 3 $20 billion LNG export plants get built at exactly the same time. We really only had gas for 2, but we built 3, which was unfortunate. The gas producers at the time told governments that it wouldn't affect domestic prices. That didn't make any sense at the time, and it's proved very wrong. So they did tell governments something that turned out not to be true. I can't believe they didn't know that. The effect of having export contracts where you've got to draw on domestic supply to fulfil them is that we have very tight supply-demand balance. That's all gas prices get up to $20 a gigajoule. They're back down now to 10. I think the government is probably doing all it can and all it needs to on gas. As I say, overseas in Asia and Europe, there's over $30 a gigajoule. Here it's around 10. Look, if you're a manufacturer of paper, glass, fertiliser, and you built your plant on $4, $10 is a disaster. But $35 is catastrophic for consumers and business, and I just think it would look very bad for the industry to do that. I think they know that. So I don't think the government has a trigger to act now, but I suspect the government will move very quickly if those prices get much above 10 and get anywhere near the international prices. Look, on Ukraine, I don't know how that'll work, but I would be stunned if anything that was done saw prices move above $10. That is a no-no area to go.
Quentin Dempster.
Mr Sims, thanks very much for your years of public service and the great ideas you've put forward to build Australia as a more dynamic, competitive economy. Your mandated revenue sharing legislation has forced the global tech platforms to start compensating local news media creators, but arguably there's a bigger competitive imbalance in video streaming. The global video streamers have access to all the eyeballs of Australia, but there's no legislated content quota. Shouldn't we be following Canada, which I understand has mandated by law that video streamers like Netflix and Disney Plus must spend up to 30% of their Canadian-derived revenues on content made in Canada?
Look, Quentin, I'm afraid I am going to disappoint a bit. I try to come out with views that can be very robust, and I don't hold back when I think they're in our area of responsibility, but that is purely an area for the Department of Communications, the Minister for Communications. So that
you don't see a competitive problem here?
Oh, look, yes, the fact that there's requirements in one sector that don't apply in others. I mean, we recommended in our News Media Bargaining Code that, we recommended in our Digital Platforms Inquiry, there were 23 recommendations. One of them was for a News Media Bargaining Code. Another one was to remove that inequity where digital players work to different rules to non-digital players. Over-the-top players have different rules to others, and we recommended that be addressed. The Department of Communications has a process underway. All I know is that it's very complicated to fix it. So yes, it should be fixed. And that's what we recommended in our Digital Platforms Inquiry, but quite how you go about it, I think it's a really complex issue, and my colleagues in the Department of Communications, I'm sure, are having a fun time sorting it out. But it must be sorted out, but it's not easy.
Krishani Danji.
Krishani Danji from SBS World News. Thank you for your address. The ACCC launched unprecedented action against Telstra, as you alluded to in your speech, over its actions in remote Indigenous communities, saddling vulnerable families with thousands of dollars of debt over illegal mobile contracts. I wonder, how was this allowed to happen in the first place, seemingly unchecked? And is there more that the ACCC or the government could do to stop this from happening in the future? Is it a sort of case-by-case basis where, when the issue occurs, it can be potentially rectified, or is there something that we could do to really stop this from happening?
Yeah, look, thanks for that. It was outrageous behaviour. The way most of our law and activity works, it is after the event, you see the problem and you deal with it once you see it. The way to prevent it up front is, I think, two things. One, by taking action, such as we did with a very large penalty, and that sent messages to all telcos. I also think having an unfair practices provision would cause them to stop and think. We've now got the level of penalties we need on Australian consumer law. The government changed those 3 or 4 years ago, so that we've now got very high penalties for breaches. If we had that unfair practices provision, it would mean that companies would think twice. They would face very high penalties for that. So I don't think that's something you can deal with by upfront rules, such as I'm talking about for digital platforms. I think there's a role for upfront rules. On this, I think it's just make the law clear and have very large penalties for breaching it.
Sarah Basford-Canales.
Thanks, Mr Sims. You mentioned in your speech that ACCC had an 88% engagement rate among staff, and you've previously mentioned you fostered a culture within the agency that allowed junior staff members to speak up when they didn't agree with senior management approach. Many other public servants wouldn't feel that way and wouldn't feel comfortable standing up to their bosses' bosses. Is this something that needs to be instilled across the public service? And how do you think the APS can bring back this type of frank and fearlessness at all levels of the hierarchy?
Look, I can only say that I just made it really clear that I wanted people to tell me if they disagreed, and I had this wonderful time about 5 years ago now, where I was insisting that something has to happen this particular way, and a very young lawyer told me it couldn't, and I said that doesn't make any sense. And so we had a robust debate, and she finally stood up and said, look, you can't do it the way you want to do it. It's illegal. And I've been parading that example all around the ACCC. I thought it was terrific. And so you just encourage it by saying, I mean, you can't say it once. This sort of thing you have to say again and again and again, and your actions have to back it up. So I think it's absolutely fundamental in any organisation, public service or commercial organisation, that people feel they can speak up. I mean, the worst thing I want is if somebody thinks I'm going the wrong direction and they don't tell me. I mean, that's a disaster. I could make all sorts of mistakes. I make enough as it is already. So, yeah, no, look, I think just really believing just how important that is. It is fundamental that people feel able to speak up. And ultimately, once you've fully understood the point, you may disagree politely, but make sure they have that ability and let them know that, keep mentioning it and live it in your deeds. It's very important.
Thank you.
If I could just follow that up, I mean, you, long before you were in the ACCC, you had a very long and distinguished career in other bits of the public service. Why do you think that sense of frank and fearless advice within departments seems to have declined so much?
Oh, look, honestly, Laura, I don't have a view about that. I mean, I'm not close enough to the public service to have a view about whether...
You were there for a long time. And it's
no, I was there for a very long time. A very long time ago, I left the public service. I've got to get my years right. When you get to my age, you just lose a decade or two. But I left the public service in 1994 before coming back to the ACCC in 2011. So I knew the public service extraordinarily well then. I don't know it as well now. So I just don't understand. I understand the premise of your question. I don't have the knowledge, but I do think it is fundamental that occur, and I hope it still does, but I don't, not close enough to know. I mean, we interact with the public sector in bits, not continuously.
Nick Stewart.
Thanks for your speech. You've talked a lot about data. You're famously not on Facebook. Is that because you're concerned about the use that data might be being put to? And is it the case that perhaps we just don't have, if you were to look back now on the way things were, you would, rather than think of Facebook and these other organisations as, you know, engaging in the media companies, that what you're actually dealing with is a different industry, the data industry, and that really you've made basically a category mistake when you go back to looking at the way you've dealt with the media industry and other organisations like that, that it is far more similar to the Telstra, the idea of NBN, the idea of networks that have to organise, that are natural monopolies, and then you have other organisations that work on top of that.
All right, I think I got that, but maybe I didn't. Look, I'm not on Facebook partly because you've got to fill out this enormous form that tells you your life story, and I just...
Data.
A, didn't want to do it, and B, didn't have time to do it. I have to say the other point, though, is just how many of these things have you got time to be on? I mean, hello. I mean, I made the mistake of getting on LinkedIn not so long ago, and I just don't have any time to look at it. So I just think there's a bandwidth issue from my point. So that's probably the dominant reason I'm not on Facebook, just don't have time to deal with the medium.
I don't think that's an answer. Most of Australia is on Facebook. What makes you so different to most of Australia? Are you much less busy than...
No, a 7-day-a-week, 10-hour-a-day job, I have to say, is what makes me a bit different. I just don't have the time. I mean, other people may find the time. I don't. And I am, in 3.5 weeks, looking forward to working a 5-day week, not a 7-day week, believe me. Maybe then I'll have time for Facebook, but not now. Look, your data point, I'm not sure I fully got that. I mean, data is absolutely fundamental. But if your point was that, Google and Facebook have not replaced media. right? They don't do any media. And so I used to run into this explanation of why are you helping yesterday's businesses? We've got to look forward. And I kept making the point that media is not like Kodak film that's been replaced by digital or horse and buggy replaced by the car. Google and Facebook have not replaced media. We still need media, we still need journalists, and that was under great threat without the News Media Bargaining Code. So that's what that was about. One wasn't replacing the other, one was damaging the other. Whether they set out to do that or not, they were. But I'm not sure I fully answered your question.
The next question is going to be asked by Hannah McKnight, who's the club's illustrious coordinator, who's leaving us for an even more illustrious career at DFAT very shortly.
Thanks for that, Laura. This question comes from Tim Shaw, Director of the National Press Club. Whistleblowers have assisted past investigations conducted by the ACCC. However, they enjoy very little protection in Australia. How would a federal ICAC assist future whistleblowers and the work of the ACCC?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, ICAC is its own issue, of course. I think with us, it's more the protections that whistleblowers would have in companies as a particular law itself. So other countries have better laws to protect whistleblowers in a company. I think, off the top of my head, that's different to a federal ICAC. I'm not sure that would make a difference to that issue. I think it's whistleblower laws on their own. Sorry, that's my best shot at that one.
Julia Hare.
Julie Hare from the Australian Financial Review and Press Club again. Thank you. I assume in any long career there are a few regrets, and I'm just wondering whether you are reflecting on that in the weeks before you leave. And I'd just like to ask whether you think the ACCC made a mistake by pursuing the criminal cartel action against bankers involving their ANZ capital raising.
Yeah, look, two questions in that. I mean, there's always regrets, as you say. I have to say the Frank Sinatra song is dominant in my mind. I'm sure I've made them, but I can't really remember too much about them, which may say something about my memory. Look, I fought very hard in 1990 to sort out the structural problems of Telstra, along with Phil Gagens and others, and we lost. That was a big battle to lose, so I regret that. Look, the ANZ case, there's been a whole lot of debate about whether we should have taken it criminally or civilly. People can have views about that. We made a view based on the best evidence we had at the time. That evidence largely hasn't seen the light of day. When I mentioned that at the Senate estimates, the senator there said, well, don't say things like that. You're casting aspersions on the people who no longer, so it's a complicated issue to talk about, but we made the decision based on the best evidence we had at the time. So nothing else to add, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Greg Brown.
Greg Brown from The Australian. Just on the AGL deal, you mentioned competition, or you spoke about potential competition issues previously. Just from a consumer point of view, is there a risk that prices could rise, electricity prices under the proposals? Scott Morrison has talked about wanting to keep coal-fired power stations open, for as long as they're operating life. Is expediting their closure to 2030, do you think that risks price increases?
Oh, look, I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint on that one. I mean, our issue is going to be that competition issue with generation and transmission and how actually that works in Victoria. To work out what's going to happen to price would need a lot more information than we have at the ACCC. That's not really, you'd need to be modelling the entire system. You'd need to make all sorts of assumptions, and we're not in that business. Other energy regulators might be, but that's very much an issue for the pure energy regulators, AR, AEMO, AEMC, there's plenty of them, not one for us. We don't have that expertise to make that judgment. We'll just focus on that one issue I mentioned.
Mike Foley.
Mike Foley, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Mr Sims, do you believe that the lack of competition across the Australian economy is contributing to the slow wages growth we've seen over the past decade?
I think it's very likely that it is. I mean, it's hard to get that particular evidence of this, then that, but clearly firms like to get market power. so they have control over their consumers and so that they have control over their suppliers and their workers. So I think more concentration almost automatically has an effect on wages. How much, I don't know. We're not, ACCC wouldn't be in a position to say that, but I think there is an issue there. As a matter of logic, there must be, but how big it is, I don't know. But yes is the answer.
Shani Danji.
Shani Danji, SBS. You mentioned in your speech earlier that there's a number of a number of pieces of legislation that you'd like to see to protect consumers and businesses, but they aren't moving fast enough. Where do you think those handbrakes are, and what do you think needs to be done for those to be implemented?
Oh, I think there's a lot of resistance from large businesses is one factor. I think COVID is another factor, simply because many of the departments just don't have the bandwidth to deal with these issues totally understandably. I mean, I'm close enough to departments such as Treasury. They are absolutely flat out working impossible hours. So the idea, and that's why when I mentioned the merger laws, I said, look, you don't have to focus on it now. That would have been beyond rude when they're absolutely flat out. So I think, but the bigger issue is, and look, the push for some of these has been fairly recent. But look, you can certainly see as we're getting closer to some of them that there's a lot of business resistance. That combined with, so they're not easy. And when you've got a COVID environment as well, I think we're just going to have to wait, as I said in the speech, for COVID to settle so that people can have time to focus on these broader issues. Then I'm hopeful progress will move, and hoping that all you in the room will support it moving. Thank you.
Sarah.
Thanks again, Mr Sims. Sarah from the Canberra Times. Last month, both the Prime Minister and Health Minister said claims by pharmacies and retailers alleging the federal government was redirecting rat supplies or skipping the queue to deal with the shortage crisis were false and lies. Mr Hunt said the ACCC would be investigating the claims to prove whether they were false. I'm just wondering, can you confirm whether the ACCC has launched that investigation and whether it has found any truth to those claims?
Yes and yes. Indeed, one of the major players outed themselves as soon as the statement was made and said, whoops, sorry, we didn't actually mean that, or we didn't really have evidence, and we take it back. So there's one example that clearly was saying it when it wasn't true. We're looking at a range of others, and also looking, how much the federal government said straight away we weren't doing that. Whether other governments were doing it, I don't know. Look, it is murky because people needed a lot of rapid antigen tests very quickly, so there was a lot of demand facing limited supply. But the answer is yes, it did happen, and yes, we are investigating. I'm hopeful that the rats crisis is over. My local pharmacy's had this sign up outside it for a very long time saying, don't bother coming in if you want a rat test, we don't have any. A week ago I walked past and the sign wasn't there anymore. And I walked in and said, have you got any rats? He said, yeah, which type would you like? And he had them all assembled on the... So I'm hoping the problem's over. But look, I deviate. The answer is yes, it did happen, and yes, we are investigating.
Well, if I could ask you the last question. One constant debate for a really long time in politics, which goes to competition issues, has been about superannuation. Now, I know you've spoken about this in some aspects in terms of large super funds and things, but that fundamental argument about the structure of industry super and whether it's, it somehow is uncompetitive when it appears to have provided a good competitive stimulus to the market. What's your view of the overall superannuation sector and whether industry super is the sort of evil force that the current government certainly seems to think it is?
Yeah, look, so I think I can only comment on the number of players in superannuation. It's a very diverse market. There's a lot of players. We would have concerns if a couple of the largest players tried to get together, but apart from that, it seems a competitive market. And look, Laura, I'm sorry, I don't really have a view on that other bit, simply because that's something that APRA and ASIC deal with. It's their issue not ours. So again, I'd be straying off the reservation if I went
please
there. I
do.
just don't actually have the knowledge. No, I understand. I can easily be tempted to get off the reservation when I have the knowledge, but I actually don't follow that enough to know.
Please thank Rod Sims for his address today.